Hey, thanks for joining me live to talk about B12. I apologize if you think we're talking about MTHFR today. There was a little bit of a disconnect. I sent out an email saying that was the topic today, but that's actually going to be the thing we talk about next week in our live. But here's the good news. MTHFR is all about methylation, which has a lot to do with B vitamins. Today we're talking about B12. So if you're interested in one of those, you'll be interested in both of them. So they're both great conversations to have. So bring bring your questions. I actually had a really great direct message question about B12, and I want to spend a little bit of time unpacking that because I think the the person that asked me this question, I think there's going to be a few of you that have a similar situation, and it'll be a great conversation. But first, just a few of the things that I've heard questions about B12. Um, there's a lot of B vitamins. Why is B12 a big deal? So, yes, there are a lot of B vitamins, and they have names and they have numbers. So, it's like B1 is thiamine, B12 is cobalamin, B9 is folate. They have numbers and they have names. So, B12 is cobalamin, and why is it so important? Well, globally speaking, the B vitamins are all about helping us create energy. So one of the things that I see all the time, that probably the number one thing that people tell me when they come and sit, that they're actually sitting in this very chair that I'm doing this live session from. This is my consulting chair, but they're telling me like, hey, I am really tired. Like, I can't take a nap and fix this. I can't rest from exercise and take a week off from my workouts and feel caught up on my sleep. I just fatigue. I'm so tired. I can't do my life. Tired. Um, who is most likely to have a B12 deficiency? A vegetarian, because the food sources of B12 are animal products. So I have honestly, in almost I think it's never happened actually, where I've seen someone who is a strict vegetarian or vegan have a really good level of B12. They almost always need to be supplementing and having a strategy around that, because they're not eating the food based sources of B12. Now, that is not to say that it's only vegetarians or vegans that have a problem with this. The other population that is more likely to have issues with this are those that have digestive problems, where not only are they not absorbing B12 very well, but they're not absorbing a lot of nutrients. Stomach acid is super important for the absorption of B12. So if you don't have good stomach acid, it's hard to absorb B12. Those with autoimmune conditions can have trouble too, because there's something called intrinsic factor that is important in the absorption of B12, and you can actually have an autoimmune condition where your body's attacking intrinsic factor, and you don't absorb B12 for that reason. So that's a little less common, but I'd say most common is not consuming it in your food, whether you're a vegetarian or just not consuming enough animal products in your diet. Then second is digestive issues, specifically with stomach acid, and then the third is an autoimmune condition. Um, what happens if I've had B12 that's been low and it goes on for a long period of time? First of all, let's talk a little bit about the symptoms of what low B12 actually feels like. The fatigue is the number one. Another one is neurological symptoms. So you get some kind of like tingling and numbness down the legs and the arms. Now, if you have a really significant deficiency in B12 and it goes long term enough, you can actually have neurological damage, and that becomes permanent. So is it possible to have B12 be low for so long it causes neurological problems and they're irreversible? Yeah, unfortunately, that is true. How do I know if I'm deficient? Well, symptoms are usually like I said, the most common thing, people come to me, they're like, I'm super tired, and I don't have a lot of energy, and then the numbness and the tingling and down the neurological symptoms, that would be another symptomatic way to tell. But I catch most B12 deficiencies on labs, and the truth is that there's a difference between a clinically low level, enough to get you diagnosed with a disease, and you know and then just having a level that's functionally low, that where you don't feel your best and perform your best. That would be called functionally low. It means that your labs are still in range, but you really don't feel that good. And so, like, B12 is a great example. The clinical range is, it depends on the lab you're using, but somewhere in the mid 200s is the low end of B12 for most labs. But really, a functional lab is well above 400. And to even expand on that a little bit, most people I see, they feel the best when their B12 is in the 600, 800 range. So big difference. You're not going to get diagnosed with low B12 until you hit less than the mid 200s, but really you're going to feel best when it's 700, 800. So there's a big difference in there. So that's why I test people, number one, and I test them using a functional or optimal set of lab ranges versus just, hey, what's the world say about that? So do I just take a supplement if I'm low? So here's how I approach it. If someone is really low on B12, like they're sitting here and it's in the 100s, or it's not quite 200 or low 200s, we need to usually do something a little quicker than a supplement. Now, that's not to say we don't want to add a supplement, but that's a little bit longer game plan. That will raise it slowly and keep it elevated as long as we get it up. So if someone's that low, shots will do it, and so will infusions. So there's two ways we can go about that. I don't do those in the office, but I know when they need to be done, and I help connect the person to the right solution for that. So usually what they'll do is, if your B12 is low enough, it's a series of shots until it gets up. And then we go, well, why did it go low in the first place? Let's unpack that. And maybe you need a supplement. Maybe you need to look at your digestion. Maybe you need to eat more food sources of B12. We need a strategy. So I think supplementation is part of the strategy. And I have a really great supplement that I use. It's called MitoCore by Orthomolecular, and I use it as a multivitamin energy support, and it has a lot of really good B vitamins. B12 specifically is in there too. So that's the one that I like, and you can visit my Full Script account platform if you want to, and set up an account. And I have a link bio page. It's lnk.bio/Dr. Jenny, and that has all of that information. Like if you want to check out ordering platforms and stuff like that, MitoCore is the one that I really like. But I also think it's important for us to understand, why did it get low, and look at all those underlying causes. That's a big thing too. So that's, what do you do if it's low? You get it up, because you'll feel better. Can you overdose on it? Yes, you can, actually. Just like anything, too much of a good thing is no longer a good thing. Now, B vitamins fall into the category of water soluble. That means that you excrete via the urine anything that you aren't using. So there's way less of overdosing on a water soluble vitamin than there is on a fat soluble vitamin. Your fat soluble vitamins are going to be your vitamins A, D, E, and K. So those, it's easier to take too much of them. They'll store in the fat. You have to be a little more careful with fat soluble vitamins. You still don't want to overdo B vitamins. And I do see this because, like I said, I run this lab on a lot of people, and some people have really high levels. And those are usually the ones that are taking it in, taking B12 isolated. That's the only B vitamin they're taking. And they're taking some like Monster Energy support or something, like really huge dose of B12. So that's why I like to use the MitoCore, because it has a good balanced dose of all the B vitamins. And then it's also important, I think, to talk about the form of B12 that you want to be taking, because it comes in different forms, and some are a little bit more usable to the body. And that's where we're going to talk about that next week on the methylation side, the MTHFR. The That's all about kind of the forms of vitamins that you can absorb. But in the case of B12 or cobalamin, you want a methylated form because that's going to be the easiest for your body to take in. It's called methylcobalamin. So when you look at your ingredients, it'll say methylcobalamin. If you see something called cyanocobalamin, it's a little bit less attractive of an option, in my opinion. It's cheaper. It's what's in a lot of vitamins, quite honestly, because they're trying to get these things to market with the least amount of cost, not asking the question of like, what's really better for my body and what's going to be absorbed. It might be worth paying a little more for a variety and a version that's gonna do that. So those are some of the questions that I had. And then I also got a direct message from someone, and this is a little bit of a story. This is a super sweet young lady, and I've known this lady for years. She was in my youth group when I was in youth ministry as a leader, doing that. Not a job, but a volunteer. And anyway, so I've kind of seen her grow up, and now she's a mama. She has a 1 year old little guy, and it's precious. And so I love seeing these kids grow up into these, married women with babies and raising their kids. But she reached out to me and she said, "Hey, I had my B12 tested. It was in the really low range, like 135, 140 ish." And which is low. We already talked about under mid 200s is clinically low. So that is like, that would flag on a standard lab test that says, hey, this is low B12. So she said they gave me shots. They gave me 4 of them, like once a week, and I didn't feel any difference. I think I need to talk to you because I don't feel good. And so the first thing that I did is this is not about a number on a piece of paper. This is about a young lady who doesn't have the energy to parent a precious 1 year old child. And she is probably struggling. She's probably struggling to get out of bed in the morning. She's probably struggling to get through her day. And y'all know, if you've been chasing a toddler around and have had a 1 year old, you know what it's like. I have 2 grandkids, one's 2 and one's 1. And we were babysitting this past weekend, and my husband and I looked at each other. We're like, how do we do this? Like, they take a lot of energy, and if you're tired, you're not bringing your A game. So that's the first thing, is like, this is not about B12. This is about quality of life and having the energy to do what you need to do. So, okay. I actually reached out to her and I said, "Hey, I think we need to speak one-on-one. Let's have a discovery call." That's what that's called. You can check out that link bio too if you want to speak to me one-on-one about something personal. But there's so much in that I wanted to share. And the first thing is, okay, they gave her a low number on a test, and they invoked a solution, which was, in her case, B12 shots, and she didn't feel any different. There's so many questions I have there. Did anybody follow up after those 3 shots and repeat the testing and say, okay, her B12 was here. She had 4 mega doses of B12. That should bring up the B12. Where is it now? If that hasn't been done, that's the first thing that I would say is like, does she not have enough B12 because she's not being exposed to it? Did anybody ask her about what she's eating? Is she vegetarian? Is she, I don't know these things. So that's where it's really important to listen to people, to collect a good health history, to consider the whole person, not just a number on a lab, but the whole story. So that's number 1. Did we have a situation where we did something and it worked or it didn't work? We don't even know. And so let's say she had 4 shots of B12 and her B12 went way up, and it went from 135 to 400. And that should be enough of a difference clinically for her to feel better if that was the problem. So that's number 2 consideration is B12 the reason she doesn't feel good? There are a lot of reasons that a young woman who just had a baby a year ago could feel tired. Her iron could be completely bottomed out from being pregnant, from breastfeeding. And that's another thing that's not being tested routinely and correctly, because and that's, we need to have a whole nother session on that. There's some things you can look at. There's some sensitive markers for iron status that aren't routinely being done, and people are told, oh, your iron looks fine, and it's not. It's in the toilet, and no wonder you're tired. Okay, so there's all these other things. Could her thyroid be off? You bet it could. Could it be an autoimmune thyroid showing up after pregnancy? That's the number one time that an autoimmune thyroid problem shows up, is postpartum. So like, all these things have to be looked at and analyzed so you can help her. Okay, let's say in number two scenario, let's say she had 4 B12 shots and her B12 didn't go up. It went from 135 to 180. And like, it went up a little bit, but not what you would expect given a huge influx of B12. Well, then we start looking at stomach acid or autoimmunity. Like, is that an issue? Is she attacking her intrinsic factor? And now she's never going to absorb B12. You could bathe her in it and it's not going to work. So that's the other thing. So those are all the things that, like, you look at a person. That's functional medicine, looking at the person like a whole person, and trying to help, not just solve the problem on the piece of paper, but solve the real problem. Is like, I feel like I can't be a mom because I'm so tired that I can't get out of bed and take care of my 1-year-old. And I just want to take a nap with him all day. And he's ready to go run around in circles at the playground because he's 1. So there's that. And then, then there's the other question of, say that she did raise her B12 with shots. We had 4 shots and it went from 135 to 400, 500. She feels good. Even if she feels better, what's the plan to keep it there? No, nobody is anybody having the conversation with her of, okay, now that it's good, let's change your diet. Let's get you some ongoing supplements, whatever. So that's where it's like, it's more than just a simple question. And so I just wanted to share that story in case that's you with a question like that. That's what we're looking at. So again, I apologize if there was some confusion on, you thought we were talking about methylation and MTHFR variants. We will do that next week. So this is you get just an extra week to think of a question or something like that. If you have a question about about the upcoming topic, which is methylation and all of that, put it in our Q&A group. If you haven't joined yet, and it's free, just join. That's a great place for me to just go in there really quick, check for questions. In fact, this B12 conversation is happening because someone, when they entered the group, I said, what would you like to hear more about? And she said, I'd like to know about B12. And so that's where this is. And then I get questions from direct messages and things like that, and it colors this conversation. Next week will be methylation. So post your questions in the Q&A group, or send me a direct message, like on Facebook or Instagram or something like that. If you have a question that maybe you're not comfortable sharing in a group setting, like that. But chances are, if you have a question, somebody else has a question. So also share this link for this Q&A group and these lives with your friends, because the entire reason I am having these conversations is because even though I love to work one-on-one with people, and sometimes people need to have their labs done, they need to sit down and be heard, and they need someone to help them sort through these questions. Sometimes they just have a simple question. And that was my heart behind creating this group, is a place to answer simple questions. If you don't need blood work and you don't need to talk to me one-on-one, I would love to help just by answering a question if I can. So help me share this group and get this information. I think people need this information. Otherwise, I wouldn't waste my time doing it. But anyway, thanks for joining me today, and we'll talk again soon.